Yeah, no, they come down, especially Manitoba. There's a couple northern cities there that, or towns at least, that they have to lock down pretty heavily.
Really?
Because they're just all over the place. Yeah.
Dang.
Have you seen a polar bear?
In a zoo.
Just in a zoo?
Yeah, just in a zoo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Here's the question.
Yeah.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
You are listening to the Compass Podcast. We navigate people to God each week by discussing the latest message from our series and hope you find the encouragement through the conversation.
Well, welcome to this new episode of the Compass Podcast. We've just kicked off our brand new series, 1,000 Tables, and we're really excited about this series. And today with me to discuss this series, what we heard on Sunday, is Nate Grella, who's our North Fort Worth Campus Pastor. So glad to have you here, Nate. Thank you.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being here. And also Marshall Heppner, who's our North Fort Worth Worship Pastor. So good to have you guys here. This is really fun.
Thanks for having us.
We're really excited about what this series is going to do for our church. If you don't know, this 1,000 Tables series is really an initiative rooted kind of in the belief that true community transformation begins with a simple yet powerful act, and that is inviting your neighbors to the table.
Right.
Marshall, you're new here.
Yeah.
Now I've known Nate for 6 years. In fact, I think you and I got here within weeks of each other.
Yeah,
at
I think
Compass.
2 weeks after you.
Yeah, something like that. We were both Ohio boys, you
Yes.
know.
Go Buckeyes.
Go Buckeyes. I think
That's
we're the
right.
only Ohio State fans on staff.
Well, that's the only team you should be rooting for.
Yes,
so.
praise God.
Yeah.
Bless up. But, Marshall, you've been here a year and a half now,
Just over. Yep.
and you come from, tell us a little bit about your experience in Canada
Yeah.
and being a part of the church there and the shift to Texas.
Yeah, it's been wild.
I lived in the Northwest. I know the culture in the Northwest, definitely different from Texas,
Mhm.
but Canada, like a whole different country.
A whole different country, whole different culture, church culture. It's
Yeah.
been quite a shock to the system for sure.
Yeah.
Canadians, I always joke is, we like to evangelize with our parkas on, where Americans love to be billboards
Yeah.
for the things they believe in, whether it be sports teams, whether it be a political affiliation, whether it be whatever. They love to wear that on their shirts and hats and whatever. Canadians have parkas on where you have to invite us into your home in order for us to take those parkas off and to get to know us. And so coming down here and instantly knowing who you affiliate with and what you stand for, being so loud and proud about that, which is a cool American stereotype, it's been interesting. Even walking into coffee shops and like random people are just like talking about Jesus and praying and stuff like that. That you don't see a lot of that in Canada.
Right.
And so yeah, it's been wild. I think for us as a family, I have my wife, Natasha, and my 2 little kids. It's been an amazing year and a half to feel like everybody's been a good neighbor to us.
Mm.
And so I'm actually excited about this next series because now we get to reciprocate.
Yeah.
We've now finally put some roots down. We finally have our house that we moved into just over a year ago and getting to know our neighbors. And so I'm excited to just explore that. I'm terrible at it. My wife is more that hospitality, loves people.
All right.
His wife will talk to anybody.
Is that right? She makes friends everywhere she goes.
She is that that person where she just wants to love everybody. I'm a little more reserved. I get peopled out. I'm a closet introvert. So I do the table stuff really well. I love the one-on-ones and just bringing in a single family into the home. So I'm excited about that.
Is your wife really good at creating spaces and like for people to gather and that sort of, because I think Amanda's that way too, right?
Absolutely. I think our wives are probably better at this than we are.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because I would say, I'm an extrovert on Sundays, but closet introvert as well.
Yeah.
Like I just want to hang out at home and just watch sports and not talk to anybody sometimes, which gets me in trouble.
Right.
That's interesting. Now, Nate, your perspective is interesting, and I love that you're both here today because you're coming from Canada, Marshall. Nate, you came down here from an older church.
I was actually in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And there, obviously we're an hour outside of Baltimore, hour and 10 minutes. Literally, you could get to the coast. So
wow.
The thing about that to me is we're in one of the most unchurched areas in the United States. It's 1 in 10 people have any religious affiliation or background there. So the church that I pastored at, it was a church that had been around for 40 years. The guy that was there was the second pastor to have ever pastored the church. So basically he was in some ways the founding pastor because it was a church plant that the guy didn't last very long. And, you go to a place like that, and I grew up in Ohio where I would say, while they wouldn't consider it sometimes the Bible Belt, it's the Bible Belt. There's church on every corner.
Agree with that.
Sure.
And your perception of church, kind of like what you said, Marshall, like you can come down here and you walk into a coffee shop or a restaurant and you literally, you see people praying and, having Bible studies and all that stuff.
The amount of church bumper stickers here is crazy.
Right.
And billboards,
which with how I drive, I don't want to put one on mine.
Oh yeah.
There's no compass on the back.
No, there's no compass on the back of my truck.
No, not on my car either. So, but you go here and or even Ohio, and you're like, you can tell, because there's the conversations happening, or you see families praying at a dinner table, but you go out there and it's like a whole different thing, and it's so foreign, and it was a just completely different context to do ministry in. And it changed my perspective on this whole thing. And I think it's why we've kind of adopted certain things in North Fort Worth that I think are effective to helping us reach our community. That I don't know if I would have done had I not been in those contexts before.
So that's really interesting. I mean, you moved down here, and I remember when you were first starting out, you guys went into Eaton Heights. You were in a movie theater first.
No,
right?
No, we were Eaton.
You went to Eaton first.
Yeah.
And you guys shifted around so much.
11 times.
11 times.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. When you look back now in the position that you're in, I mean, what sort of things have you done that maybe God spoke through you, or you kind of felt the Holy Spirit move you to do in order to sort of have the impact? Because I look at North Fort Worth now, where you guys are at and where you were 6 years ago. I mean, it is like a night and day difference. But I know that you had a lot of very intentional things that you did to try to reach different people groups and different cultures. Because for you, it was, man, like I want this place to look like heaven. I want it to be black, white, yellow, red. I want it to be multicultural, very diverse. And you can see God moving in that direction in North Fort Worth. So what sort of things did you do?
Our community is, if you come to North Fort Worth, it's a very diverse community. And I'm not just talking about the color of skin. I'm talking socioeconomic status, diversity in what you believe from a political perspective, diversity in all kinds of different ethnicities that live out in our community.
Ranges.
Like literally, age ranges. And man, it's just been crazy. So for me, like I wanted our campus to look like what our community looked like. I didn't want it to look like Pastor Nate's family, right?
Yeah.
And even when Marshall was interviewing, that was like one thing we talked about, because his wife, she is from a different ethnicity, and so that changes things. And we really wanted to change like that perception that the church had to look a certain way. And so I just got really intentional about it. Obviously when you're mobile, you don't have a physical building to call home. So you really do have to neighbor well. You gotta go like, how are we going to meet people? Cause they're not coming to a building. You got Sunday morning from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then you're out and you're not, and then there's high school students meeting there. So we started doing things like block parties and, I bought a inflatable movie screen, and I was going around to neighborhoods doing movie nights at their community pools, and just as a way
That's
for
so
us to love our neighbors. And then my wife Amanda is amazing at just getting to know people.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was going to she would introduce herself to all of our neighbors. So we always know who our neighbors are. And then she even got onto the HOA welcoming committee. So anytime anybody moves into like our area of the neighborhood, she's the one that takes a gift basket to them. She introduces them. She gets their names that way. It's a simple way. And then like, hey, we're just, we're just down the street here.
Yeah.
We'd love to, get to know you guys better. And what it's done is like, it opens conversation. And then usually it's like, well, what do you guys do? And well, my husband's the pastor at Campus. And sometimes that goes well. Sometimes it's not,
Yeah.
But then I also think because we had kids in the school system, I think that was really important for us. We wanted to be in the community where we were going to pastor, and we wanted our kids to go to the schools where the kids that were coming to our campus were going. And so that allowed us, because our kids were involved in a lot of activities, to sit in the stands with the other families.
Yeah.
And man, I've had the opportunity to just have some really cool experiences, even this past week, of a baptism that I got to do just because of a guy who I first met sitting at the basketball game that my daughter was playing in, and his daughter played on the same team. And his first impression of me is not, oh, I know this guy because he's the pastor at Campus.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, who's that crazy guy who's yelling at the referees just like a normal person would do? But and then he came to the church and he didn't recognize me. But then he put it all together. And and now, here we are, 9 months later, he walked up and he got baptized, and baptized his son, and his wife got baptized too. So it's just really cool.
Yeah.
So that's some of the stuff we do. And I think I learned a lot of that just from being on the East Coast. I mean, I shared a lot about that in the message this week. That was kind of, this message was, for me, it was like, I've lived this, right?
Yeah.
And the East Coast, I had to learn it. But I think God put me on the East Coast to learn it so that I could bring it here.
Yeah.
And help to, really create, I think, maybe a opportunity for our campus and all of Campus. Hopefully, we're reaching thousands of people because of it. So,
And now we have all of these people moving here from California, from the East Coast, from the Northwest. I mean, Dallas-Fort Worth is about 8 million people right now. And it's projected to be 12 million in 6 to 8 years. Is that what it is?
I mean, it's grown. I know that I think it's 20 years. Maybe 25 years.
Yeah.
They said that the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex will be the largest city in the U.S. Like, it'll overtake Chicago, New York, LA, the ones that are there now. Like, this is where people are moving to.
Yeah.
And because of, if you think about it, like, we can drive 25 minutes out and still there's ranches and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's going away. Like,
Yeah,
even
it is.
out in North Fort Worth, like when I moved there was a bunch of ranches. Those are gone. And now it's just neighborhoods.
I remember.
It's
I
my
remember when
neighborhood.
we got
That's-
here.
Yeah, Marshall's
Literally my neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when we moved here and we went to go look at the new property.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, I'd never been out there.
Yeah.
And there was nothing. And I was like, what in the world?
Yeah,
It's
it's crazy.
like, good luck, Nate.
Yeah.
now there's buildings and roads everywhere around it.
For sure.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, I would love to know could you share just a personal story or experience, related to reaching out to neighbors and inviting them into your life or faith journey?
Yeah. I have a really cool one. So COVID hit in Canada, and it hit harder in Canada. We had a lot more restrictions than I know was down here for sure.
Yeah.
And so we were held to, literally immediate family, like your closest 12 people, essentially it was. And so for my wife and I, we lived in a little townhouse development, and all of a sudden my wife is talking with the neighbor lady who I didn't know who she was, but they started a friendship. Her name was Quinny. She's originally from Hong Kong, spoke all sorts of broken English, and we, had to Google Translate a little bit and trying to figure some stuff out. She had 2 kids, Alex and Allison, and they spoke English. They had that down, but and then their dad was still in Hong Kong and kind of sending money back as he was working out there. But long story short, my wife, again, the saint that she is the one that loves people more than I do, and she strikes up this friendship, and all of a sudden we're trading food dishes over the fence line, and
That's cool.
and then I get to know Alex, and he's an 8-year-old kid who wants to learn how to play guitar, and they find out that I do that for a living, and so. All of a sudden, I'm popping into their house and I'm teaching them guitar. And then Allison is coming over to the house and having water fights with Jace as a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old. And we built a beautiful friendship through COVID restrictions. And they became part of our immediate 12, essentially. And, needless to say, we got to, share our faith a little bit with them. And they got to share some of their culture with us. And it was really heartbreaking when we finally had to move and in the middle of COVID and everything to come down here. But they became really great friends where it was literally this 1,000 Tables initiative of, hey, let's just eat together. Let's do community together. And it was just a beautiful thing through those 8-12 months that we did that.
Yeah. I, when we were in Pennsylvania, we moved in. Perception of pastors is not great, thanks to the stories that people have read or things seen on the news. And so we really had a hard time at first of even getting to know our neighbors. Like I told this yesterday in the message that when we first moved in, like we would pull into the house up to the driveway and the neighbors would be out, and as soon as we pulled up, they knew who we were and what I did. They would literally, like ants, like go right into their houses because they didn't want to have a conversation with us. Because I think in their mind, they thought that I'm going to go bait and switch them, and invite them to church. That's what it was going to be about. Yeah. And I just wanted to get to know them.
Yeah.
So we had to get intentional. And my kids were young at the time, but my son and daughter both played basketball, love basketball. So we put a basketball hoop out in our front driveway. And like I would come home early from work and I'd be out there with the kids playing basketball before the neighbors would get home, because I knew that was the only way I was going to get to introduce myself to them. Because like you even knock at the door and they're not answering, like they're checking their Ring cameras and like, no way are we answering. So we started to get to know our neighbors and we started to talk to them. And our next door neighbors, an older couple, Joe and Dixie, we got to know them and we got to know their story. We got to hear about how they lost a son, and it began this, we got to not only know their names, we got to know more about them.
Yeah.
And then Joe and Dixie then started telling the other neighbors, these are just normal people, like it's okay. And so then they're
not as weird as you think.
They're not. Yeah. They're not what you've read about or seen on TV.
Right.
And so then the other neighbors started to actually have conversation with us. And what was really cool is my kids, because we're away from our family, they saw Joe and Dixie as kind of like pseudo grandparent kind of thing.
That's awesome.
So, we would have these different things going on, and Blake and McKenna would go over and ask Mr. Joe and Miss Dixie if they wanted to come see him sing at church or whatever. And so they showed up one Sunday, and they must have told the other neighbors, because then that's when they start coming around. And then what happened is, these other neighbors, Mike and Melissa, that lived catty corner to us, they had 2 kids that were our kids' age.
Yeah.
Well, we started interacting. And then one Sunday, Mike and Melissa show up at church, right? Like unannounced to us. And they come and they're there for several weeks. And then Mason, their son, decides to get baptized. And then, Madison, their daughter, decides to get baptized. And then Mike, who was super rough around the edges, he gets baptized. And then what happened is they're inviting us over for game nights, and we're having these game nights, and they're getting to know us as just like, I'm just Nate, and this is my wife Amanda, and these are our kids, Blake and McKenna.
Yeah, they stripped the job title.
Yeah, we're just real people, just like you, and we struggle with the same things, and we have all this stuff, and it was just really neat. And so for us, I shared this yesterday. What was really hard is like the neighbors across the street, Brian and Amanda, Joe and Dixie, Mike and Melissa, and then a little bit further down the street, a few more of our neighbors, they all started coming to the church. And basically when we got ready to move here, our entire street had started attending our church, not because of really anything, no invitations we had made, just because we had just neighbored well. And it was super hard for me to leave that, because I knew that was not the normal street in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, was not like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I think we've done a really cool thing here in just an unintentional way. They're now coming to church. That was not our intention. It was just to let them experience the love of Jesus and how we lived our lives. So it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I've always appreciated about Nate and Amanda is they lead with Christ, not with Christianity.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a difference there where people hear Christians and Christianity and they instantly have this preconceived thing. But when we're leading with Christ likeness of, hey, we're just here to love you. We're here to just get to know you and to be that good neighbor. That changes everything. That has been something that has impacted my family in the last year and a half, watching them do that. So, yeah.
I think that's some of this is all, honestly, it's my own family, and I've encountered it where I have family that does not want to, walk through the doors of a church because of the hurt and the perception that's out there. So, we say this, I mean, most of the time I say it every week, if I can squeeze it in, but we say, and it's hanging in our lobby. And I went around this summer to all the campuses and preached this message on James. And I shared this picture of this banner that hangs in the lobby that says, we want Compass to be a place where people feel loved and accepted, not outcast or unwanted.
Love it.
So the goal for our family has always been that we're going to love people and we're going to accept them.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want them to feel like they're outcast or unwanted. They can't come in our home. They can't hang out in our driveway. And hopefully, because we did that well, maybe one day they'll just go, man, maybe I should check out this place where they worship at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because of that, it's built all kinds of cool connections and relationships. So,
Marshall, you touched on just how to think as a neighbor, right? How to think and to be Christ-like out in your community. How do you apply that though in your everyday life, right? Because we are messed up people. We are at the grocery store. We're in, and there's people in front of us, or maybe someone cuts in front of you in traffic, right? You always have those little everyday annoyances. Like, how can you apply this concept in your everyday life? Because I think it's one thing to talk about and be like, but there are all these little moments in our everyday where you have an opportunity to be this. So what can we do to be reminded of, hey, I am a neighbor and these people around me are my neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously something to be said about just the way that the Holy Spirit keeps you in check. The way that there's just the promptings of, hey, cool it, buddy. Hey, man, like maybe don't go there, or don't do that, or maybe go do that. Yeah. Go and say hi. I've watched, even yesterday, it was a beautiful thing. Spectrum was out in our neighborhood and they trying to fix our one neighbor's internet, and they fixed his, but then broke mine. And so I walked outside and kind of just like, what's going on? Whatever. Right. And like, the Holy Spirit uses my son to keep me in check because he's right on my heel, running out the door. And then he's just like, what's up, neighbors? And I'm like, okay, I got it.
That was it.
That was it. That was rather than me coming out a little hot or whatever, trying to figure out what's going on. And then Jace comes out. He's like, "What's your name?" And the Spectrum guy's like, "Daniel, like the Lion's Den." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. This is really cool. All right." So
well, it's interesting because yesterday we discussed the importance of names, right?
Yeah. Sure.
With names and knowing your neighbors' names. I mean, why is that simple step essential in reaching out to others? I mean, how does that actually show God's love?
Well, I think what we talked about is if you don't know their name, you're not going to know their story. And if you don't know their story, then you can't show them the love that we're called to show as Christ followers. It's when you get to know the name, then you get to know the story. And like I was talking about my neighbors earlier. I learned Joe and Dixie's name. We got to know them better. And then what happened is they shared the story of how they lost their son. And it allowed us to relate to them on another level because we didn't know what their hurts were.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the things that were the holdups for them that had them even angry with God. Right. And so you can't love someone if you don't know them well. So, I think we say this, every number has a name, every name has a story. And if every person that comes, I'm super intentional about trying to learn the names of the people who walk through the doors. Now that gets harder and harder as we grow. But if we get to know their names, then they know we care. And if they know you care, they're more willing to share some of the hurts and the things that are going on in their lives or open up to us about stuff that we'll never know otherwise. So I think the name thing it's so simple, right?
Well, people want to feel valued, right? And so as soon as somebody's just like, I went on a Wednesday. I don't get a lot of chances now since my wife started working nights to go to our NOFO students on Wednesday nights, but I went the other week and I walk out there and like about 6 students are like, Marshall, what's up? And I'm like, I don't know who these guys are, but they know me. And I'm like, I felt like, oh, okay, I belong here. I haven't been around, but like that made me feel good, right? And so I think that there's a intrinsic value to people know who I am. Yeah. So that then they can know actually who I am, right?
Yeah. I think Brooks, you and I talked about this because you were working on the message for North Richland Hills.
Yeah.
What Jesus says to the religious expert is he basically puts the ball back in his court and he says, well, what does the law say? Right. And he says that you got to love the Lord your God and you got to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that love your neighbors as yourself, that's the graduate level. We can't love someone until we know their name. So we got to go kindergarten, just get to know the name first.
Yeah. Got to pull a Jace Heppner.
That's right. You got to, and from there it builds. So loving that takes time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true of any relationship though, right? Like if you just start dating someone, you don't love them the first date. I mean, that's just weird. If you said, I love you, like that, they're probably not calling you back. So, or texting you back.
Probably.
So if you're dating right now, don't do that. Right.
Yeah, right.
But over time, as you get to know someone, that's when the emotions begin, you get to know them better and the level changes. And then that's when you really can love the way you're supposed to love.
That's so good. Yeah. I read, there was a research study done on everybody's favorite word. And it turned out everyone's favorite word was their name.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And so you can really hit like the importance of like you were saying, the name. Everybody seems to struggle with remembering names. So when you, like, I've always known it when I'm out at places and you remember somebody's name, they go, oh yeah, but I can't remember yours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it means a lot. And so, I just found that kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
But like what, for those of you that are listening right now, you might be thinking, how can I be more intentional with my neighbors, right? Okay, starting with the names, like doing the kindergarten thing, right? Just starting there. But like what other practical steps or approaches can we take to kind of get to know our neighbors on a deeper level? I mean, you mentioned doing like a game night, like you guys were doing game nights at your neighbor's house, but beyond just knowing their names and actually start to build, meaningful relationships.
Yeah. One thing that I actually find fascinating about Texas is how in my neighborhood, at least, it seems like half of the houses have golf carts and they're just ripping around, getting to know each other. And
buy a golf cart. Check.
You move into my neighborhood, you have to buy a golf cart or something. Yeah, it's weird. But another thing that they're doing in our neighborhood is on Fridays and Saturday nights primarily, you drive around the neighborhood and you just see pockets of people sitting in their driveways, just kind of like shooting the breeze. and getting to know each other.
I love that.
And
that's so great.
And again, like, you don't see a lot of that in Canada because we only have like 2.5 months of weather that you could
Things
maybe
are
do
thawed
that.
for 2 months.
Yeah. And so, and then here I'm like, my one neighbor, Andrew, shout out. I don't think he'll listen to this but hopefully he does. Maybe I'll forward it to him. But he's been inviting me all summer to these little, hangouts. And I'm like, dude, it's still like 105 degrees out. I'm like, I don't do hot weather. And so I said, once it gets to like below 80. And so I've been intentional now to like, text them. I'm like, hey, where's everybody at type thing and doing that. Good. I think there has to be that level of, I just need to make an effort.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm a little thick blooded, and thick. I'm a thick boy. And, I just know that, I told him, I'm like, I'm just not going to be comfortable in the summer. So I'm like, once it gets to something regulated, I'll be there. And so I'm making that effort now.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's cool that's happening in Marshall's neighborhood. I think one of the weirdest things that I experienced when I moved here, right? Texans are some of the most friendly people I've encountered, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody says
it's
hi.
True. Yeah.
But if you look at our neighborhoods, and maybe this is North Fort Worth, but I everywhere I drive, it seems this is the case. There's a fence
everywhere,
and there's
everywhere,
and we don't build front porches. So most of the time, what I've found is that people hang out in their backyards if they're hanging out outside.
Yeah.
But there's a fence up, so they're not interacting with their neighbors. And so we've got to be intentional, I believe, to get out front, and that's a change because we've got these fences that we can isolate ourselves really easily.
Yes.
And then you've got, everything that happened with COVID, we isolated. But I think what I've seen, and I'm seeing that across all our campuses, is people are hungry for community.
Yeah.
And they desire it because we were wired from it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So we've got to create opportunities to create that community and build it more. So it is things like, we get to know their names. So, I would say the easy thing to do is like be the one to say, hey, I'm going to host a block party.
Yeah.
And just get your neighbors together. That was a cool thing that we did in Pennsylvania. We've done that a couple of times here. And so you get to know them. And then out of that, then you go the next level. And it's like, have them over for dinner. We're coming into the best time of the year to do this too. I mean, we got Thanksgiving, we got Christmas. There's all kinds of opportunities, especially if you've gotten to know your neighbors well. Like I love a good white elephant party,
Yes.
Right.
Oh, those are so fun.
Like, dude, it's such an
gosh.
easy thing. And it breaks down barriers because you're laughing and all those things.
Yeah.
And then I think too, I think we can hear neighbor, and that just means the people that live right around us, right?
Yeah.
I think neighbor also means it's the parents that you sit around in the stands at baseball or football or basketball. It's
where you are.
It's where you're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you got that neighborhood block diagram yesterday, and you got the 9 squares you got to fill in minus, or 8 squares minus yours, we need to think of ourselves, not just the people that live in the houses around us, but every time we're out in the community with people, you're like, this is an opportunity to be a good neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do that, I believe it changes everything. So
that is so good. Now, I think something that other people might be thinking is they're like, okay, I'm supposed to be a good neighbor, get to know their names and be intentional in my relationships with the people around me. But I think one of the things that comes to mind is like, how do you strike a balance between being a genuine neighbor and sharing their faith without appearing pushy or having some sort of like hidden agenda?
I think if our first thought is, or our hope is, that we are going to get them to church, then we've missed the whole mark on this, because that's not what that's not even what this series is about, right? Because that's not what Jesus says. He doesn't say, love the Lord your God and invite your neighbor to church. He says, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
So the goal of this is to be just like Jesus.
Love it.
and to meet people where they're at. And there should never be this thought that, man, I'm going to meet them where they're at, and then I'm going to win them to Jesus. Because if that, then we've got it wrong. Like obviously, do we want them to come to a relationship with Jesus? Absolutely. But that should never be our first thought.
Yeah.
I love this line. We say it all the time. It's like, we can't make people fall in love with Jesus, but we do get to set up the first date, right? So if their first interaction with Jesus is interacting with us as Christ followers who are just doing what we're called to and neighbor and love well, I think then they find Jesus in the midst of that. Then they start walking in, and it's not the bait and switch, or it's like they don't feel like we're multi-level marketing them. Hey, let me sell you this so you can.
I think there's something about like understanding of like, I'm just here just to love you. I'm not here for anything. There's no transaction here. Mm-hmm. There's just me being me, who God's called me to be in this moment. And I think for me, I look at the interactions that I have with the people around me, whether that be in a Walmart, whether that be at my neighbor's driveway, whatever that is I'm just going to be who God's called me to be in this moment. The transaction is not mine to make. That's for the Lord to convict and bring them into a relationship as well. Like all I can do is, like Nate said, is set up a first date. People know who I am and what I do for a living. And, I can invite them to church in due time. But for me, I'm just trying to love them,
So what kind of advice might you have for people who are facing similar challenges? Like they're trying to reach out to their neighbors. They're trying to build a relationship with them. Maybe they're kind of standoffish.
Oh man, that's interesting, because I think it's really easy for us to go, you know what, they're not giving me the time of the day. They don't want to talk to me. And I think our nature as humans is, well, they don't want us to be around, so we're just going to give up, right? And I feel like, some people are just hard to break. You gotta, but again, it's like, it's simple things, I mean, my kids were the ones that really broke walls down, because who's gonna say no to the cute kid who's coming up to you and
with his basketball?
That's really hard. Unless you just hate kids, right? But I think it's simple things too, like it's like baking. You bake cookies and then you take some cookies over and drop them at the door with a note like, hey, just want you to know,
here's our number. Here's our number if you need anything.
Love it.
That, and then it's like, what are the things we can do? I think Amanda has done great. Like, she found a way to get to know people through this, being part of the HOA welcoming committee, I think that you just got to keep after it. Like, don't give up on it, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to figure out how to neighbor well. And so I'm not saying that you're going to find that everybody likes you either.
Well, that's why I leverage my kids. My kids are the icebreaker for everything. I mean, who says no to my absolutely drop dead gorgeous baby daughter?
Absolutely.
That's right. I just like hold it in front of the people. I'm like, love us.
Yeah. Well, and again, so sometimes you have to meet them where they're at. Right.
Yeah.
So I met one of our neighbors in our neighborhood now. His name's Paul. I met him at our community pool, and we started talking, and man, he was, cussing like a sailor and all this stuff. And then, but he asked me what he did. And, that's always an awkward conversation. And I'm like, I'm a pastor. And then he said a couple other choice words, and, like he was surprised kind of way, so you already know where I'm going with that. But then
that's interesting. So usually like straighten up. They feel like, oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, he didn't. He was cool. Like, he was like, and we chatted then for a while.
Yeah.
Well, then what I did with Paul is he told me where he lived. Right. So I have a little note cards I write just when I see something or want to recognize someone or just celebrate something. I've got these note cards that sit on my desk, and I'll just write it, and either we'll send them, or if it's somebody on staff, I'll just put it on their desk. Well, I thought about it. I'm like, I'm going to do that for Paul. So I took the note card out, I wrote it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to just drop it in his mailbox on my way home from work. And so I did. And in it, all I said was, hey, Paul, you know what? I know, like, it was cool getting to meet you. Love to get to know you more. Let's grab some wings or something. Cause we talked about football and wings. And I'm like,
gosh, this sounds so good right now.
Yeah, I know they do sound good. And he was like open to it. And then, at one point he showed up at church. And then we baptized Paul in the portable baptistry.
No way.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So now Paul has this sweet, he got a 1965 Mustang for the year he was born. And so he brings it up every Father's Day, and it's out there in our little car show for Father's Day weekend.
Very cool.
And, Paul went through Rooted and all this stuff. It's
Amazing.
Like just a cool story of like, there was no other. And he would have been one of those that I would have said was a little harder to connect. So, but it's cool how God moved in his life. So,
and I have to say too, like, it's also a very spiritual thing that we're doing. So what role does prayer play into this?
Yeah. I mean, like my prayer life has drastically changed into, I was reading through Everything Belongs by Richard Rohr, and he talks about this prayer life around that, be still and know that I am God. And he breaks it down to just this, like, be still and know, be still, and this, like, I'm walking in the presence. I'm walking in constant relationship with the Holy Spirit. And as we're doing that, my prayer life is just a yes and amen to what God is doing. And so for me, I look at those situations of like, okay, God, I'm sensitive to who you are and what you're doing in this. One of my prayers constantly is, God, work through us and around us, go before us and clean up after us, of like, you control this. I'm just saying yes and an amen to what you're doing. And so go before me, be around me, work through me, and then clean up after me, because I'm not always going to say the right things.
Yeah. I think one thing we've been praying as a staff at North Fort Worth is like, God, just give us opportunities. And like, they come when you open yourself to allowing God to show you things, then you get to have these conversations that lead to things.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, it's like, okay, God, what is the opportunity you're going to give me? What's the conversation?
Yeah.
And that's been really cool to get to sit in the stands and, somebody comes up to me and starts sharing something, and that changes everything. So,
yeah, I mean, one thing that I've seen some amazing fruit in just in the last year and a half being here is, as I've built relational equity with people, we've been every Thursday morning as a staff, we gather to pray for a half an hour first thing in the morning. And one thing that's on our guided prayer list is pray for 5 families and then let them know you prayed for them. And like, I've seen amazing fruit in just that, as relational equity is already there and established of like, hey, we know each other. We know we have, like, we're caring for you, and we know that you love us back. Seeing the fruit for that and loving our neighbors that way has been amazing too.
Yeah.
If we took this seriously, what do you hope to see happen?
Well, just think about 1,000 tables, right? 1,000 meals, or 1,000 game nights, or whatever it is that you choose to do with the challenge of like being a good neighbor.
Football and wings,
yeah.
Bless up.
Whatever it might be that you do, if you did that and you gathered 8, 10, 12 people around your table and you just began to neighbor them well, and over time you got to know their name, you get to know their story, and they started to simply walk into the doors of one of our campuses. I mean, it's going to be an exponential kind of growth thing where we're going to see, like we saw a few weeks ago with Decision Day, where 160 people get baptized. We're going to see that on a whole nother level. Like, I believe we could see what we read about in the book of Acts. Like, it's not a revolution like we talked about in the Jesus. It's a movement, right? Yeah. Like, there's literally a movement because we care so much about the people around us that we go, man, look what happened with that first table gathering.
Yeah.
And now we're going to do another one. And so when you do that, because then you invite new people to the table, right? And if you just kept doing that, like, I believe it's going to change our communities. It's going to change our workplaces. It's going to change the schools in just a really good way. And it's what we're supposed to do. So like, if we just do that, I think we're going to see the fruits of that for years. Like, we're going to hear stories that are like, I got invited to a dinner party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And because I got invited to a dinner party, I was an atheist. But I decided that there was something better that I wanted to be a part of. And I walked through the doors of the church, and God got a hold of my life, and it changed me. And I believe those are the kind of stories we're going to hear, because we're just intentional about what Jesus said we were supposed to do anyway. So,
well, and I just look at just the family impact too, just because you invite, say, the dad to a men's group or to a football and wings thing or whatever. And as soon as that happens, all of a sudden you see what happened with your friend there that is baptizing his kid, and his wife's getting like it changes families
for sure.
You know, like as soon as the relationship happens and there is that equity there of like, oh, they care for me, you know, all of a sudden it impacts all of it, right? Yeah. It's amazing.
I think it's a generational thing. You know, it changed a whole family. It changes the generational shift in that family forever in the right way, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's, man, if you just think about it, it wouldn't take long for us to see like something move of God happen.
It's a cool pyramid scheme. It's one of those multi-level marketing things. If you really think through it, it's like, oh, then they invite people, and then they invite people. You know,
but that's how the church started, right?
Sure.
It was like they go out, and then it just grew from there.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, I think while we didn't talk about that this week, you know, that's Acts 2. It's what Acts is all about.
Yeah.
And it's like they're gathering, they're eating together, fellowshipping, breaking bread, communion, worship.
Yeah.
That's what was happening. And it wasn't happening in the four walls of a temple or a church, or, you know, it's happening in their homes.
In the homes.
Yeah. And there's a reason why that was happening. And it's what we need to do today.
I know what I'm going to invite people to do at my house.
What's that?
Football and wings.
That's right. That's right.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the Compass Podcast today. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you. So excited to see where this goes. And I'm sure we'll have you all back on real soon.
Let's do it. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for listening in on this episode of the Compass Podcast. Remember that every Monday we will launch a new episode. We look forward to seeing you, and make sure you subscribe.